All right, everybody. So now, the next thing that we're going to look at is statistics-based functions. And you'll notice that we have 6 different tasks that we need to work on. So what we're going to do is look at these in sections of 2 each, because we've built our skills up to the point where we should feel more comfortable with producing this type of data and information. So let's take a look at our first example. All right, it looks like we have last names and first names, and we have 7 different quizzes. So it looks like probably the teacher wants to figure out something with the total number of details or information involving each of their students. Let's read through this. This spreadsheet contains grades for students in a social studies class. Students have taken 7 quizzes this semester. You have several tasks to accomplish on this spreadsheet. In cells C23 through I23, find the class average for each quiz. You can create your function in cell 23 and extend it to the right. Okay, let's look down. Oh, okay, so it looks like we want to find the average that the class did for each of these different quizzes. All right, a bunch of students got some pretty solid grades, some not so great grades. It looks like the teacher probably wants to look at this information and see what they can do to adjust things and, gather more info on how the class did as a whole. All right. So in this bottom piece, we have to find the averages. So for example, this cell right here in C23 should be made of the averages from all of these students. I think that's something we can figure out. Okay. In cells K2 through K21, find the average each student has for all of their quizzes. You can create your function in cell K2 and extend it downwards. Okay, so for example, this first person, Freeman Baptista, they have each of these quiz grades, and we want to find their running average here. Okay, we can do that. In cell K23, so let's scroll down to that, you want to find the average of all of the averages you calculated in cells K2 through K21. And this tells you the entire class average. Okay, so it looks like we want to find the average of all of these average grades. So we're going to build a function down here that's built from the average of all of these. Okay. And finally, once you've completed the above, we're going to see if each student is doing better or worse than the class average. In cells L2 all the way down through L21, create a formula that compares the student's average to the one found in cell K23. Okay? If the student is doing better than the class average, have the cell say yes, otherwise have the cell say no. So I'm looking at this word if right here. So that's probably going to be a hint that we're going to be working with. All right, we have to go back to our logic statements, our logic functions, and run an if statement on here. All right, looks like we can handle this. So we're going to do just one of these together, and then I think you'll be able to figure out everything from there. So let's figure out the average for quiz 1. We're going to double click into the cell, get rid of that question mark, and we're going to figure out which function we need to use. In this one, we just need to find the average. So we just type in equals average, parentheses, and then it says what's the range. So I'm going to scroll back up, and I'm going to click and drag this all the way down. Now notice that C23 cell up here is kind of like floating around. We just want to make sure that it's not in the way completely. So I'm just going to make sure that I can drag it to there, and I'll double check the numbers. C2 through C21. All right, that looks good. And then all I need to do from here is close the parentheses. When I press enter, the average for the first quiz came out to a 60.8. Looks like this class needs a little bit of support when dealing with these quizzes, just based on that information. We do have a few zeros in here, so maybe the student was absent or something like that. So maybe we need to address that as well. What's nice about this function is we can just click and drag it across like we've been doing before, and boom, all of our averages are found. So it looks like these quizzes are actually pretty rough for this class. Now for this example, we're just dealing with numbers that were randomly generated, but if I saw this as a teacher, I would be a little concerned as to why my students were not doing so well on the quizzes. So the teacher can look at this information and say, what can I do to help students out with this? And one of the serious ones is this last quiz average over here, 47 on here, and also a 49. If there's 60s on most of them, or pretty darn close to 60s, yeah, the quiz is still not a great representation of what the students are learning, but when you have these outliers or these numbers that really stick out, it makes you question or revisit those particular quizzes and say, like, what happened in this quiz that could be getting in the way? Could the students have had a snow day before quiz 3 and quiz 7? There's a lot of different things that we can analyze or try to figure out. I'm going to leave it for you to calculate the averages in this column. And I'm also going to allow you to calculate this average. And the last thing that you want to do is use an if function on this last piece, just to say if the student is beating the average, where you'll compare this particular cell for this student versus this cell right here. All right, so that's the first task on here. We're going to quickly transition to the next task, and we're just going to keep pushing forward from there. All right, so now we're back, and we're on task number 2. What we have here is pretty much the exact same set of data for the students, but let's take a look at what our second task is. Now, your teacher wants to find some specific averages. We want to see the average score for students passing and the average score for students failing. In cells C23 through I23, all right, so let's scroll down and look at that. That's right here. We want to determine the class average for grades that are passing, greater than or equal to 65. So we want to basically split the class into 2 sections. One side will be the students who are passing. Let's find the average grade to see if we can find any information. And on the other side, we want to see the students that are failing. So they got a less than 65. Okay? So I would approach this with the average if function. So let's go in and get rid of that question mark. I'm going to put in equals average if, and then in parentheses, the first thing I need to put in is the range, so the things that I'm talking about. Drag it all the way through here, comma, and then we can put in our rule or our criterion. And of course, we know our rule. In quotes, it's going to be greater than or equal to 65. End my quotes and my parentheses and press enter. All right, it looks like we got an 81.8181818112. It's looking a little weird on here. So let's just go in and bring this down to font size 11. Maybe we can bring it even smaller. All right, so it looks like maybe we need to expand this column a little bit for here. Okay, we'll expand those a little bit. And sometimes you need to do that when you're dealing with different numbers and things like that. And again, we're just trying to learn based on what we're playing around with. Let me give those just a little bit more space. And again, this is something that happens, and all we need to do is repair it. So the number of students who are passing with an average is they have an 81. So the students who pass on average, let's drag this across again. All right, so an 81, an 81, a 74, an 84, an 83, an 85, and an 82. So again, as a teacher trying to look at this and think, like, what's going on here? This quiz 3, just like in the previous sheet, didn't have too hot of a score. So something's going on with quiz 3, because even the students who have passed are having issues with it. All right, so if you're able to figure out the equation to find the average for students who have passed, I think you'll be able to expand that idea for the next row at the bottom for the students who have failed. That basically means they just have a less than 65 score on the average if. All right, in the next lesson, we're going to be tackling tasks number 2 and 3, so stay tuned and we'll be going from there.